The sweltering tropical atmosphere shimmered across a Slido airfield on Saipan as American forces relentlessly pressed their advance inland during the intense month of June 1944. Amidst the desolate landscape of shattered hangars and cratered runways, a remarkable sight momentarily diverted the attention of Japanese ground crews from the incessant artillery barrage. There, nestled within the tall, verdant grass near the perimeter, lay a downed F6F Hellcat, remarkably intact. This was no mere debris. It was an unparalleled opportunity, a tangible piece of the adversary's formidable arsenal. For nearly 2 agonizing years, Japanese aviators had transmitted increasingly desperate dispatches detailing a novel American fighter that carved through their aerial formations with an unprecedented lethality. The Hellcat had made its combat debut in August 1943, and within a mere handful of months, it had irrevocably shifted the delicate equilibrium of air power in the vast expanse of the Pacific theater. Yet, intelligence summaries and the poignant testimonies of pilots could only furnish a fragmented understanding. Here, finally, was the authentic article, the very aircraft systematically dismantling Japanese naval aviation, seemingly awaiting meticulous scrutiny. The audacious recovery operation commenced without delay, even as the ferocious battle for Saipan raged around them. Ground crews toiled under intermittent enemy fire, their determination unwavering, to relocate the formidable fighter to a more secure position, ultimately preparing it for its arduous journey back to the Japanese homeland. Every passing hour was critical. American forces were advancing with alarming rapidity, and this invaluable prize could not be permitted to fall back into enemy hands. The Hellcat transcended the mere identity of a single airplane. It represented a profound gateway into American industrial prowess and engineering philosophy, offering a rare chance to comprehend the true nature of the formidable adversary Japan was confronting. By the waning days of June, as Saipan succumbed entirely to American dominance, the captured Hellcat was already well on its way to the Japanese mainland. Its destination was the esteemed Yokosuka Naval Air Technical Arsenal, where some of Japan's most brilliant aeronautical engineers eagerly awaited its arrival, poised to dissect it, both conceptually and physically. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. What are your thoughts on this topic, and where are you from? The initial external appraisal unveiled an aircraft that appeared unrefined, almost brutish, in stark contrast to the elegant, slender contours characteristic of Japanese fighters. It possessed a greater mass, a thicker profile, and a more substantial presence in every conceivable dimension. Where Japanese fighters pursued an ethereal grace and nimble agility through meticulous weight reduction, this American war machine seemed to wholeheartedly embrace sheer bulk and robust construction. The engineers meticulously circumnavigated the aircraft on that inaugural day, diligently recording measurements, their hands tracing the intricate patterns of riveted panels, scrutinizing the expansive wings, and examining the colossal cowling that encased its powerful engine. They took particular note of the armor plating position behind the pilot's seat, a barrier of considerable thickness, seemingly capable of deflecting rifle-caliber projectiles. They observed the exceptionally robust landing gear, engineered to endure the punishing stresses inherent in demanding carrier operations. Their gaze then shifted to the formidable .50 caliber machine guns, 3 strategically mounted in each wing, accompanied by ammunition boxes capable of accommodating hundreds of rounds, a testament to its sustained firepower. Every design element of the Hellcat unequivocally communicated a design ethos that unequivocally prioritized pilot survivability, sustained offensive capability, and unwavering reliability, superseding the pure performance metrics that had meticulously guided Japanese fighter development for a full decade. What they were meticulously examining was not merely a fighter aircraft. It was a palpable manifestation of America's formidable industrial might, and a profoundly divergent answer to the fundamental question of what constitutes an effective combat aircraft. The sagacious engineers recognized that deciphering the intricate secrets of this formidable machine might represent Japan's final, desperate opportunity to formulate an effective countermeasure against the burgeoning American air superiority. As they meticulously prepared to embark upon the detailed examination, they remained blissfully unaware of the profound revelations this captured fighter would ultimately disclose, or the disheartening nature of those impending discoveries. By the midpoint of 1944, Japanese naval aviation was experiencing a catastrophic hemorrhage in the vast skies over the Pacific, a grim reality known to all, yet few dared to acknowledge the full extent of the devastating problem. The illustrious Mitsubishi A6M0, which had once instilled terror in Allied pilots throughout 1941 and 1942, had now tragically transformed into a veritable death trap. American pilots had astutely identified its inherent vulnerabilities: subpar high-speed handling characteristics, an almost complete absence of armor protection, and wing structures that catastrophically failed under the immense G-forces encountered during aggressive high-speed dives. More significantly, the Americans had ingeniously engineered fighters specifically crafted to exploit these weaknesses, and the formidable Hellcat stood preeminently at the apex of that formidable list. The intelligence chasm confronting Japanese aviation was utterly crushing. Pilots would return from the brutal crucible of combat, those fortunate enough to return at all, bearing harrowing accounts of American fighters that could absorb an extraordinary quantum of damage and inexplicably continue their flight. They vividly described aircraft capable of diving away from a pursuing Zero at velocities that would render any attempt at pursuit a suicidal endeavor. They reported a devastating firepower that could utterly shred a Japanese fighter with a single, pulverizing burst. However, these reports from traumatized aviators, delivered amidst the chaotic fog of war, constituted fragmented narratives rather than precise engineering data. They could not furnish critical details such as bore and stroke measurements, compression ratios, precise wing loading figures, or intricate fuel system specifications. They were utterly incapable of elucidating how the Americans had ingeniously resolved complex technical dilemmas that Japanese engineers continued to grapple with in frustrating futility. The escalating situation had reached such a critical juncture that by early 1944, Japanese naval air groups deployed across the expansive Pacific were suffering pilot losses at a rate far exceeding their capacity to train replacements. The once mighty First Air Fleet had been utterly decimated at the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944, an engagement that American pilots would subsequently immortalize as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. In a single, cataclysmic day of combat on June 19, Japan endured the catastrophic loss of approximately 300 aircraft and their irreplaceable cadre of highly trained pilots. The formidable Hellcat had served as the primary instrument in that devastating slaughter, accounting for the overwhelming majority of aerial victories. What rendered this escalating crisis particularly acute was the disquieting reality that Japan's esteemed aeronautical engineering establishment was operating increasingly in a shroud of impenetrable darkness. American aircraft were undergoing rapid evolutionary advancements, with novel models and variants consistently emerging, each meticulously incorporating invaluable lessons gleaned from combat experience and breakthroughs in technological innovation. Japanese intelligence could occasionally acquire general specifications through various clandestine channels, yet they remained incapable of elucidating the practical engineering solutions that rendered those impressive specifications attainable. How did American engines manage to generate such prodigious power, while simultaneously maintaining impeccable reliability? How did their aircraft manage to withstand damage that would utterly obliterate a Japanese fighter? What specific materials and manufacturing methodologies enabled them to construct such exceptionally robust structures without incurring unacceptable weight penalties? The captured Hellcat represented an invaluable trove of information that Japanese engineers desperately coveted: hard, empirical data. Not speculative estimates, not combat reports filtered through the distorting fog of war, not mere conjecture based on distant observations. Here was an actual American fighter that they could meticulously measure, weigh, disassemble, and rigorously test. They could scrutinize every individual component, analyze every engineering decision, and comprehend every design compromise. They could, at long last, definitively answer the vexing questions that had relentlessly haunted them since late 1943, when the Hellcat first appeared in substantial numbers, asserting its undeniable dominance. There was also a profound psychological dimension to the capture that transcended mere technical intelligence. Japanese aviation had been meticulously constructed upon an unwavering conviction in the inherent superiority of their distinctive design philosophy, that a fighter aircraft should unequivocally prioritize maneuverability and extensive range above all other considerations, that supremely skilled pilots did not necessitate the encumbrance of armor or heavy armament, that an inherent elegance in design inherently mirrored a superior performance in combat. The iconic Zero had perfectly embodied that philosophy with unparalleled grace. And for a fleeting, ephemeral period, it had reigned supreme over the Pacific skies. But now, Japanese pilots were perishing in alarming droves, and the very aircraft responsible for their demise represented a completely antithetical set of design priorities. Examining the formidable Hellcat meant confronting the unsettling possibility that Japan's fundamental assumptions regarding fighter design had been catastrophically erroneous all along. The Hellcat arrived at Yokosuka in various pieces, partially disassembled for the exigencies of transport, yet with most major components sufficiently intact to permit a thorough and comprehensive examination. The recovery team had executed a truly remarkable feat under exceptionally arduous combat conditions, managing to meticulously preserve the aircraft's essential systems despite the challenging and perilous circumstances of its capture. Engineers immediately instituted a rigorous and systematic documentation process, meticulously photographing every single component before any detailed examination commenced. They fully comprehended that this might represent their sole opportunity to meticulously study an intact exemplar of America's most successful carrier fighter. The initial walk-around inspection alone consumed several days. Teams of highly specialized experts simultaneously examined distinct aspects of the formidable aircraft. Structures engineers concentrated their efforts on the airframe. Power plant specialists meticulously focused on the intricate engine. Systems specialists diligently studied the hydraulic and control mechanisms, and armament technicians painstakingly cataloged the complex weapons installation. What immediately struck every observer was the sheer, undeniable robustness of the aircraft's construction. Where Japanese fighters employed delicate assemblies and minimalist structures in a relentless pursuit of weight reduction, the Hellcat utilized heavy forgings, substantial extrusions, and thick skin panels, all contributing to its inherent strength. The aircraft's empty weight was approximately 9,200 pounds, a figure nearly double that of a Zero, underscoring its inherent massiveness. The meticulous fuselage construction revealed a fundamentally divergent approach to stressed skin design. Japanese engineers had honed their skills to become masters at crafting exceptionally lightweight structures using thin aluminum, carefully formed and precisely assembled. In stark contrast, the Hellcat's fuselage utilized a heavier gauge aluminum, buttressed by more substantial internal framing. The engineers calculated with growing alarm that the fuselage alone could probably withstand structural loads that would unequivocally tear a Zero apart. They discovered reinforcement in locations Japanese designers would never have deemed necessary, additional framing meticulously positioned around hatches, strategically placed doubler plates at high-stress attachment points, and massive bulkheads meticulously separating major fuselage sections, all contributing to an unparalleled structural integrity. Upon closer inspection, the major fuselage sections of the Hellcat presented a robust and meticulously engineered construction. The structural integrity of its wings, in particular, offered profound insights into its design philosophy. These wings were not merely appendages attached to the main body. They were ingeniously integrated around a formidable central section, forming a singular, continuous structure that seamlessly traversed the fuselage. This architectural choice yielded an exceptionally sturdy foundation, not only for the landing gear but also, crucially, for safeguarding the pilot and the aircraft's vital fuel reservoirs. In stark contrast, typical Japanese fighter aircraft often employed lighter wing assemblies that connected to the fuselage at various discrete points. While this alternative method shaved off precious weight, it simultaneously concentrated structural stresses and offered considerably less inherent protection in the event of a crash. Furthermore, the Hellcat's wings boasted substantial leading-edge construction, designed to endure significant combat damage without succumbing to catastrophic structural failure. Engineers observing this marvel mused that it might be possible to lose entire outer sections of the wing to enemy fire, yet the aircraft would remarkably retain its flight capabilities. During those initial days of thorough examination, the engineering team uncovered another astonishing revelation: undeniable evidence of advanced mass production techniques, operating on a scale that Japanese industry simply could not emulate. The edges of the Hellcat's panels bore clear indications of machine forming, a stark departure from the prevalent handwork often seen in Japanese manufacturing. The rivet patterns exhibited an almost perfect consistency, strongly suggesting the employment of automated or semi-automated assembly processes. Moreover, the components displayed a remarkable degree of interchangeability, a characteristic rarely found in Japanese aircraft, where skilled artisans frequently resorted to hand-fitting parts during the assembly phase. It became evident that the Hellcat had been conceived and designed from its very inception for rapid, high-volume production, a process that could be efficiently executed by a workforce that did not necessitate years of specialized, intensive training. As they meticulously documented every discovery, a troubling yet undeniable picture began to materialize. This was far more than just a different model of fighter aircraft. It represented an entirely distinct industrial and engineering paradigm. The Hellcat profoundly embodied an American philosophical stance that unequivocally prioritized the lives of its pilots over the marginal gains of saving a few hundred pounds of weight. It underscored a belief that unwavering reliability was paramount, outweighing the pursuit of an additional few knots of speed. Crucially, it posited that an aircraft needed to possess the resilience to survive not only the onslaught of enemy fire, but also the brutal demands of relentless carrier operations and the inevitable mishaps inherent in high-tempo combat scenarios. Every single design decision embedded within the Hellcat mirrored priorities that Japanese aviation had systematically de-emphasized for years. The engineers, with their rigorous professional training, were astute enough to recognize superior solutions when confronted with them, even when these solutions directly contradicted the very principles their extensive training had instilled in them regarding aircraft design. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Please leave a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. When the dedicated engine removal team finally succeeded in extracting the colossal Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp from its housing within the Hellcat's cowling, several engineers found themselves simply standing in awe, staring at the mechanical marvel. They had, of course, seen the specifications detailed in various intelligence reports. A formidable 2,000 horsepower generated by an 18-cylinder, two-row radial engine. However, mere figures on paper could never adequately convey the profound reality of physically holding components from this engineering behemoth in their own hands. The engine alone tipped the scales at approximately 2,360 pounds, a staggering weight that notably exceeded the entire mass of some Japanese fighter aircraft just a few years prior. The painstaking disassembly process commenced with meticulous precision, each step systematically documented. Engineers diligently photographed every stage, precisely measured each individual component, and recorded exhaustive notes detailing the intricate assembly techniques. The R2800 cylinder heads were the first to be removed, immediately exposing combustion chambers and valve arrangements that ignited intense and vigorous discussions among the specialists. The bore measured a substantial 5.75 inches, with a stroke of 6 inches, resulting in an impressive total displacement of 2,800 cubic inches, equating to almost 46 liters. For context, the Nakajima Sakai engine, which powered the iconic Zero, displaced a mere 27.9 liters and produced approximately 1,130 horsepower. The Americans, it was clear, were extracting nearly twice the power from an engine that was not even twice the displacement. However, the sheer volume of displacement alone could not fully account for the observed performance disparity. As the engineers delved deeper into the R2800's intricate internals, they uncovered layer upon layer of remarkably sophisticated engineering solutions. The crankshaft, a massive forging, had been machined to tolerances that Japanese manufacturing facilities would struggle to consistently achieve. The connecting rods utilized advanced alloys and incorporated ingenious design features specifically aimed at reducing stress concentrations. The pistons, too, displayed clear evidence of highly sophisticated casting techniques and integrated internal cooling galleries, crucial for managing the immense heat generated by exceptionally high compression ratios and aggressive ignition timing. The supercharger system, in particular, captivated the power plant specialists. The R2800 featured a highly advanced two-speed, two-stage supercharger capable of maintaining high manifold pressure across an extensive range of altitudes. Japanese engines, in contrast, typically relied on simpler, less effective supercharger designs. This compromise was partly driven by manufacturing limitations, and partly by an overriding emphasis on low-altitude performance, where the majority of aerial combat in the Pacific theater occurred. The American supercharger represented a level of precision manufacturing that demanded machinery and quality control processes that Japanese industry simply did not possess in sufficient quantities. The fuel injection system revealed yet another significant advantage. While many Japanese engines still utilized carburetors, which were prone to causing fuel starvation during negative G maneuvers, the R2800 employed a highly sophisticated injection system. This system delivered a consistent and uninterrupted fuel flow irrespective of the aircraft's attitude. This seemingly minor detail carried profound implications in combat. American pilots could execute aggressive negative G dives without their engines cutting out, whereas Zero pilots were compelled to roll inverted before diving to maintain positive G and keep their engines running. That crucial half-second of additional maneuvering time could spell the decisive difference between life and death in the brutal ballet of a dogfight. Perhaps the most impressive aspect was the engine's evident margin for reliability. Every facet of the R2800's construction suggested it was designed to reliably produce 2,000 horsepower, not as a fleeting maximum emergency setting, but as a sustainable and consistent combat power output. Its components were, by Japanese standards, substantially overbuilt. Bearing surfaces were notably larger than what seemed strictly necessary. Cooling passages were generously proportioned. Oil circulation was robust and ample. The Americans had clearly made a deliberate decision that engine reliability was well worth the weight penalty imposed by heavier construction. Japanese engines, conversely, were frequently pushed to their absolute limits, with components sized to the bare minimum acceptable tolerances in an effort to save every conceivable gram of weight. The outcome was engines that, on paper, boasted impressive power-to-weight ratios but suffered from frequent and often catastrophic failures during combat operations. As the engineering team meticulously cataloged their comprehensive findings, they were confronted with an uncomfortable and stark truth. Replicating the R2800's exceptional performance would necessitate not merely superior designs, but an entire industrial infrastructure that Japan demonstrably lacked. The specialized steels, the precision machinery, the rigorous quality control systems, the profound manufacturing expertise, all of these critical elements would require years, if not decades, to develop, and Japan simply did not possess that luxury of time. The examination of the fuel system commenced with a simple, exploratory tap on the Hellcat's wing tanks. Instead of the expected hollow, metallic resonance typically associated with an aluminum fuel cell, the engineers heard a dull, muffled thud. With painstaking care, they cut into the tank, revealing multiple layers of rubber-like material ingeniously sandwiched between the aluminum structure. These were self-sealing fuel tanks, designed with the remarkable ability to close around bullet holes and prevent catastrophic fuel loss. This was not merely theoretical technology. Japanese engineers were aware of the existence of self-sealing tanks, but seeing one meticulously disassembled unveiled the sheer sophistication of the American implementation. The ingenious self-sealing mechanism utilized multiple layers composed of distinct materials. The innermost layer consisted of a synthetic rubber compound specifically formulated to swell when exposed to aviation gasoline, thereby automatically plugging small punctures. Outside of this layer sat a section of untreated fabric, followed by a layer of vulcanized rubber, and finally, the aluminum outer skin. When a bullet pierced the tank, the gasoline would cause the inner rubber to rapidly expand into the hole within mere seconds, effectively stopping the leak before any significant amount of fuel could be lost. Japanese engineers conducted tests on the system by deliberately puncturing a sample section and pouring gasoline through it. They observed with astonishment as the hole sealed itself in approximately 15 seconds. The implications of this discovery were nothing short of staggering. American pilots could endure multiple hits to their fuel tanks and still stand a strong chance of making it back to base, whereas a single tracer round penetrating a Zero's unprotected fuel tank would invariably transform the aircraft into a fiery inferno. The weight penalty incurred for this vital protection was substantial, amounting to approximately 200 pounds per aircraft for the fuel tank protection alone. Japanese designers had consistently rejected the incorporation of self-sealing tanks throughout the war, arguing that the added weight would unacceptably degrade aircraft performance and that highly trained pilots should simply be skilled enough to avoid being hit. Combat results, however, had brutally exposed the inherent flaw in that reasoning. Zeros were burning in the sky by the hundreds, and their pilots, the carefully trained veterans, who were supposedly adept enough not to require such protection, were perishing with them. Moving to the cockpit area, engineers discovered armor plating strategically positioned throughout. Behind the pilot's seat, a substantial steel plate, approximately 3/8 inch thick, was angled to effectively deflect rounds originating from behind and below. The headrest itself incorporated additional armor. Even the windscreen's armored glass was sufficiently thick to stop rifle-caliber rounds fired from the front. The total weight of this armor approached 240 pounds. Again, a mass that Japanese designers would have deemed utterly unacceptable. The Zero, by stark comparison, carried no armor whatsoever. Not a single plate protected Japanese pilots from the lethal threat of enemy fire. The necessity of shielding American aviators from hostile fire became undeniably apparent. An astute engineering division undertook comprehensive ballistic assessments, utilizing confiscated Japanese munitions. They meticulously arranged armor samples at varying distances and discharged 7.7 mm projectiles from a captured Type 89 machine gun. The protective plating effectively neutralized every incoming round. Even the more formidable 20 mm shells from a Type 99 cannon, while causing discernible damage to the plates, failed to achieve complete penetration at typical engagement distances. The engineers' official communiques unequivocally stated that American pilots were ensconced behind defenses that rendered them virtually impervious to the primary armaments carried by Japanese fighter aircraft. Conversely, their Japanese counterparts occupied cockpits where even a comparatively minor pistol round could prove fatal. The suite of survival apparatus echoed this stark disparity. The Hellcat's pilot seat was engineered with exceptional robustness, meticulously crafted to safeguard the aviator during demanding carrier landings, impacts that would assuredly shatter conventional, furniture-grade seating. The cockpit itself integrated a sophisticated CO2 fire suppression system, capable of inundating the engine bay with an inert gas in the event of an onboard conflagration. The pilot's restraint system comprised an advanced 5-point harness, designed to secure him steadfastly during aggressive aerial maneuvers or unforeseen crash landings. This overarching design philosophy articulated a singular, resounding declaration: the pilot's life was exceedingly precious, far more valuable than any marginal weight savings that could be realized by excising protective elements. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Japanese combat narratives, hitherto perplexing, suddenly acquired a chilling coherence. Pilots had consistently recounted encounters with Hellcats that absorbed scores of hits, and continued to engage with unwavering resolve. They had reported American aviators who appeared utterly fearless, pressing their assaults even while enduring direct enemy fire. Now, the engineering experts grasped the underlying truth. These American pilots were not necessarily endowed with greater bravery. They were, quite simply, immeasurably better protected. They possessed the operational latitude to press and attack because they understood that their aircraft was meticulously designed to return them safely to base, even after sustaining significant damage. Japanese pilots, operating unarmored aircraft equipped with vulnerable fuel tanks, were compelled to exercise an infinitely higher degree of caution, cognizant that a solitary, fortuitous shot could spell their demise. The imperative of rendering the confiscated Hellcat airworthy escalated into an absolute priority by August 1944. Japanese test pilots urgently needed to experience, firsthand, the formidable capabilities their combat aviators had been confronting in the vast expanse of the Pacific skies. The dedicated restoration crew toiled ceaselessly, around the clock, salvaging components from other captured equipment and meticulously fabricating parts that proved impossible to procure. The powerful R2800 engine garnered particular scrutiny. Engineers were determined to have it operating at its full specifications to acquire precise performance metrics. By September 1944, the Hellcat stood prepared for its inaugural flight under Japanese command. Commander Takahide Aoi, revered as one of the Navy's most seasoned test pilots, ascended into the cockpit at the Yokosuka Air Base. His immediate perception was the unexpected sensation of confinement within the cockpit. The Hellcat had been configured for the larger stature of American pilots, and even Japanese aviators of average build found the space somewhat restrictive. However, this minor initial discomfort dissipated the instant Aoi advanced the throttle for takeoff. The R2800 engine roared to life, with an auditory signature unlike any Japanese power plant, a profound, resonant thunder that bespoke immense reserves of latent power. The acceleration down the runway was, by Japanese standards, remarkably brutal. The Hellcat's takeoff weight exceeded 12,000 pounds, a mass substantially greater than any fighter Aoi had previously commanded. Yet, the colossal engine simply overwhelmed this considerable bulk with its sheer, unadulterated horsepower. The aircraft rotated and ascended from the runway at an astonishing angle, a feat utterly unattainable for a Zero. Aoi meticulously documented in his post-flight assessment that the initial climb rate surpassed 3,500 feet per minute at sea level, a performance metric significantly superior to anything within the Japanese inventory. Once airborne, Aoi commenced a methodical series of evaluations. He subjected the Hellcat to a rigorous sequence of climbs, dives, and turns, meticulously recording its performance at various altitudes and power settings. The aircraft's handling characteristics diverged significantly from those of Japanese fighters. It exhibited heavier control forces, displayed reduced responsiveness in pitch, and demanded greater physical exertion to maneuver aggressively. However, these heavier controls conferred a distinct advantage that Japanese pilots seldom encountered: unwavering, rock-solid stability at elevated speeds. Aoi propelled the Hellcat into a precipitous dive, accelerating beyond 400 knots indicated airspeed. A Zero, when subjected to such speeds, would experience violent buffeting, its controls becoming spongy and unresponsive. The Hellcat, by contrast, simply plunged straight and true, its controls retaining their effectiveness, its massive airframe effortlessly absorbing stresses that would invariably tear apart lighter aircraft. The official test report underscored that the Hellcat possessed the inherent capability to disengage from virtually any perilous situation by simply diving away. Should an American pilot find himself in a precarious predicament, he could simply depress the nose and accelerate to speeds where Japanese fighters were utterly incapable of following without risking catastrophic structural failure. This straightforward tactical option, the inherent ability to disengage at will, fundamentally reshaped the dynamics of aerial combat. Japanese pilots were compelled to commit fully to every engagement because their aircraft lacked the reliable means to escape once a confrontation had commenced. American pilots, flying Hellcats, possessed the strategic flexibility to select their battles, initiating attacks when advantageous and diving away when outmatched. Aoi engaged in simulated dogfights against Japanese fighter aircraft, encompassing both the venerable Zeros and the more contemporary Kawanishi N-1K Shurden. The outcomes incontrovertibly corroborated the reports from combat aviators. In a slow-speed, turning engagement, Japanese fighters could undeniably outmaneuver the Hellcat. However, the Hellcat pilots, or in this specific instance, the single pilot, simply refused to engage in that manner of combat. By judiciously leveraging superior speed and vertical maneuvers, Aoi could dictate the terms of engagement with absolute control. He could execute rapid zoom climbs above Japanese fighters, exploiting the Hellcat's superior power-to-weight ratio at higher speeds, and then plunge downwards with a decisive energy advantage. The Japanese fighters, in attempting to emulate these vertical maneuvers, would rapidly shed their airspeed, thereby becoming vulnerable, easily targeted adversaries. The most profoundly sobering assessment involved endurance and simulated combat damage. While engineers had meticulously repaired the Hellcat's pre-existing battle damage to render it airworthy, they deliberately left certain non-critical damage in place to observe its impact on performance. The aircraft continued to fly with several patched bullet holes and minor structural damage that would have unequivocally grounded any Japanese fighter. The degradation in performance was remarkably minimal. The Hellcat persisted in its flight, continued to engage, and consistently brought its pilot back safely. Aoi's conclusive report culminated in a statement that resonated throughout Japanese naval aviation. American pilots were not merely flying a different aircraft, they were engaging in combat with an entirely distinct understanding of an aircraft's capacity for endurance. The captured Hellcat compelled Japanese engineers to confront a fundamental, long-avoided question: what was the quintessential purpose of a fighter aircraft? For over a decade, Japanese naval aviation had steadfastly pursued a singular vision, perfectly embodied by the Zero. A fighter, in this doctrine, was to be lightweight, exceptionally maneuverable, and possess an extensive operational range to support offensive operations across the vast expanse of the Pacific. All other considerations were deemed secondary. Armor was dismissed as superfluous dead weight. Heavy armament was considered unnecessary if one could consistently outturn an adversary and deliver precise shots. Robust construction was deemed wasteful when skilled artisans could craft elegant, lightweight structures. This deeply ingrained philosophy had its origins in Japan's inherent industrial limitations and resource scarcity, yet it had been elevated to the status of doctrine, almost a religious tenet. The Zero's early triumphs had seemingly validated every one of these assumptions. In 1941 and the early months of 1942, Zeros had effortlessly carved through Allied opposition. The fighter's astonishing 1,900-mile range enabled it to escort bombers on missions that Allied planners had considered utterly impossible. Its unparalleled maneuverability rendered it virtually untouchable in slow-speed dogfights. Pilots, rigorously trained in the demanding art of close-in combat, evolved into elite warriors, their skills honed through years of intensive practice. The Zero was not merely an aircraft, it was the tangible manifestation of the Japanese martial spirit, a testament to achieving victory through superior skill and unwavering fighting spirit, rather than through sheer industrial might. The Hellcat, conversely, represented the complete antithesis of this philosophy. Grumman Aircraft Engineering Corporation had conceived and designed it with one paramount objective: to destroy enemy aircraft and ensure the safe return of American pilots. This philosophy prioritized speed over maneuverability, raw firepower over delicate finesse, and robust protection over outright performance. The Hellcat's design specifications place such an overwhelming emphasis on pilot survival that some early Navy reviewers expressed apprehension, fearing it would prove too heavy, too slow, too much of a truck to effectively contend with nimble Japanese fighters. Those initial concerns, however, swiftly dissipated in the crucible of combat. The Hellcat achieved an astonishing kill ratio of approximately 19-1 against Japanese aircraft. For every Hellcat lost in aerial combat, 19 enemy fighters were destroyed. The statistics painted a stark and brutal picture. The Zero's empty weight was approximately 3,700 pounds. The Hellcat's empty weight, by contrast, was a formidable 9,200 pounds, nearly 2.5 times heavier. Yet, that additional weight unequivocally purchased survival. The Hellcat possessed the capacity to absorb damage that would utterly obliterate a Zero and still successfully return to its carrier. American pilots developed innovative tactics that expertly leveraged their aircraft's inherent strengths, aggressive diving attacks that utilized superior speed and overwhelming firepower to eliminate adversaries before protracted turning engagements could even develop. The Thatch Weave, a brilliant tactical innovation developed by Commander John Thatch, enabled Hellcat pilots to provide mutual cover and support, operating in interlocking patterns that effectively negated the Zero's turning advantage. I am from a quiet village nestled in the rolling hills of Europe, and I find the video topic profoundly insightful. It offers a crucial perspective on how differing design philosophies and cultural values can manifest in military technology, ultimately influencing the course of conflict. The emphasis on pilot protection in the Hellcat versus the Zero's focus on maneuverability and range highlights a fascinating strategic divergence, one that had devastating consequences for the Japanese forces. It underscores the idea that sometimes the most effective weapon isn't just about offensive capability, but also about the ability to endure and return to fight another day. The inherent nimbleness of the Zero fighter, a hallmark of Japanese aviation engineering, was a critical factor in early war aerial combat. Japanese tactical philosophy posited that the individual prowess of a pilot, coupled with the superior agility of their aircraft, would invariably triumph over any material disadvantages. This theoretical framework championed the concept that the most skilled aviator, flying the most maneuverable machine, would secure victory. However, the advent of the American Hellcat fighter dramatically altered this equation, rendering individual expertise significantly less decisive. An average American pilot, adequately trained in the devastating boom and zoom aerial combat technique, could effectively neutralize an expert Japanese pilot in a Zero, meticulously avoiding any direct turning engagement. The American aviator would execute a steep dive from a superior altitude, unleashing a torrent of fire from 6.50 caliber machine guns, collectively discharging an astonishing 4,800 rounds per minute. Subsequently, the pilot would exploit the Hellcat's formidable speed to rapidly climb away, long before the Zero's pilot could initiate a meaningful counter-reaction. Should the initial assault fail to incapacitate the Zero, the Hellcat pilot would simply ascend once more, poised for another attack run. The Zero pilot, lacking the requisite velocity to pursue horizontally and the climb rate to match the vertical ascent, was left with the sole, desperate hope of evading until the American pilot committed an error. A comparative analysis of operational ranges further underscored a fundamental divergence in design philosophy between the two nations. The Zero boasted an impressive operational radius of 1,800 miles, a feat achieved through stringent weight reduction measures and exceptional fuel efficiency. In contrast, the Hellcat's range was approximately 1,040 miles, a distance deemed entirely adequate for its designated carrier-based operations, though considerably less than that of its Japanese counterpart. Nevertheless, by 1944, the Zero's once extraordinary range had become strategically superfluous. Japan had transitioned to a defensive posture, and the forward deployment of American aircraft carriers had brought them sufficiently close to the battle zones that the Hellcat's operational radius encompassed all essential combat missions. Crucially, the extended range capabilities of the Zero came at a severe cost: the omission of vital protective features that, had they been incorporated, might have preserved the lives of countless Japanese pilots. Observing the two formidable fighters positioned side by side at Yokosuka, the Japanese engineering team gained profound insight into the competing ideologies of warfare embraced by Japan and America. Japan, in essence, had crafted a sword, an instrument of exquisite design lethally effective in the hands of a master, yet inherently fragile. Conversely, America had forged a hammer, robust, perhaps lacking in refined elegance, but undeniably devastating in its impact and remarkably resilient. The sword approach had proven effective when Japan held the strategic initiative, allowing its experienced pilots to meticulously select their engagements. However, as the conflict devolved into a protracted, grinding war of attrition, the brutal reality became clear. Hammers, through sheer force and durability, were destined to shatter swords. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Please write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. The technical assessments originating from Yokosuka began to disseminate throughout the ranks of Japanese naval aviation in the latter half of 1944. These reports, however, merely served to corroborate the desperate pleas that frontline pilots had been vociferously articulating for many months. Combat veterans, returning from the relentless campaigns in the Marianas, the Philippines, and virtually every contested island across the vast expanse of the Pacific, had been submitting after-action reports that often read less like dispassionate tactical evaluations and more like harrowing accounts of sheer terror. Now, these chilling narratives could be cross-referenced with concrete engineering data, providing a definitive explanation for the tragically disproportionate losses suffered by Japanese pilots. Lieutenant Saburo Sakai, one of Japan's most distinguished aces who had bravely endured combat since the earliest days of the war, furnished invaluable testimony that was subsequently appended to the Hellcat analysis by the engineers. Sakai himself had been shot down and gravely wounded in 1942, sustaining the loss of sight in his right eye, yet he had heroically returned to active combat duty. His comprehensive report from August 1944 meticulously detailed an engagement over Iwo Jima, where his formation of Zeros successfully intercepted a group of Hellcats. "We achieved good position above them," Sakai recounted in his written statement, "and dove to attack. I fired at one from behind and saw strikes on his fuselage and wing. He did not catch fire. He did not fall. He simply rolled away and dove, accelerating to speeds we could not match. I had hit him perhaps 20 times, and he flew away as if nothing had happened." This first-hand account vividly illustrated the Hellcat's remarkable resilience. This disheartening pattern of Hellcat invulnerability emerged consistently across numerous combat reports. Pilots frequently described expending their entire ammunition loads into American Hellcats, only to witness the enemy aircraft continue to engage or disengage with seemingly no ill effect. The 7.7mm machine guns, which had proven entirely adequate against the lightly constructed Allied aircraft of the early war period, were rendered utterly ineffective against the Hellcat's robust armor plating and sturdy airframe design. Even the more potent 20mm cannon rounds, unless they achieved precise hits on critical, unarmored internal components, often failed to bring the formidable Hellcats down. Conversely, a mere single burst from a Hellcat's 6.50 caliber machine guns would invariably shred a Zero, frequently leading to immediate catastrophic failure, as its unprotected fuel tanks ignited or crucial control surfaces were shot away. The psychological impact of this profound mismatch was utterly devastating. Japanese pilots were acutely aware that they were flying what amounted to death traps, knowing that a single direct hit could prove fatal, while their adversaries appeared almost entirely impervious to their attacks. Commander Tadashi Nakajima, who had commanded various fighter units throughout 1943 and well into 1944, meticulously documented the precipitous collapse of pilot morale in his private journal. This journal was later recovered and significant excerpts were included in official reports, offering a poignant glimpse into the despair. He wrote with haunting clarity, "The men know they will not return. They know our aircraft cannot protect them. They fly anyway because duty demands it, but you can see the death in their eyes before they take off. We are not fighting a war. We are flying to our executions." His words painted a grim picture of the profound sense of fatalism and resignation that pervaded the Japanese aircrews. The tactical reports that accompanied these deeply personal testimonies painted an equally stark and grim assessment of the situation. Japanese formations had diligently developed a myriad of elaborate tactics, specifically designed to counter the formidable Hellcat, yet none of these strategies proved consistently effective. They attempted to lure American pilots into low-altitude turning fights, an environment where the Zero's superior maneuverability was most pronounced. However, Hellcat pilots, well-versed in their aircraft strengths, simply refused to engage on such disadvantageous terms. The Japanese also endeavored to achieve numerical superiority, dispatching larger formations against smaller American groups. But the Hellcat's inherent speed advantage meant that American pilots possessed the crucial prerogative to choose whether to engage or not, adeptly picking off stragglers and isolated aircraft while skillfully avoiding any unfavorable combat scenarios. By the waning months of 1944, combat reports increasingly indicated that Japanese pilots were resorting to desperate and often suicidal measures. Some attempted ramming attacks when their ammunition was depleted or when their aircraft sustained irreparable damage, rendering further conventional fighting impossible. Others sought to exploit clouds and terrain to orchestrate ambushes, clinging to the faint hope of closing the distance sufficiently for their aircraft's maneuverability to compensate for the Hellcat's overwhelming advantages. Despite these valiant but ultimately futile efforts, none of these desperate tactics managed to alter the fundamental mathematics of the engagements. For every single Hellcat shot down, Japanese formations were consistently losing 10, 15, and sometimes even 20 of their own aircraft, a staggeringly unsustainable attrition rate. The dedicated engineering team at Yokosuka meticulously compiled these harrowing combat reports alongside their own detailed technical findings. This comprehensive assessment culminated in a stark and unvarnished report that reached the highest echelons of Japanese naval command in November 1944. The report's conclusion was unequivocal and profoundly sobering. The F6F Hellcat represents a level of aircraft design and industrial capability that Japan cannot match with available resources. Our pilots are not being defeated by superior tactics or greater skill, but by an aircraft that embodies a fundamentally superior approach to fighter design. No amount of courage or fighting spirit can overcome the material advantages American pilots possess. The document urgently recommended the immediate development of heavily armed interceptors incorporating some armor protection, even if it meant sacrificing the maneuverability that Japanese doctrine had historically prioritized. However, by November 1944, such recommendations were largely academic. Japan's once robust aviation industry was already reeling under the relentless pressure of Allied bombing campaigns, severe resource shortages, and the critical loss of experienced manufacturing workers who had been conscripted into military service. The captured Hellcat had unequivocally illuminated the profound depth of the problem, but clearly identifying a problem and possessing the means to effectively solve it were, tragically, entirely different matters. The stark revelations gleaned from the captured Hellcat ignited a flurry of frantic activity across Japan's beleaguered aviation industry. In late 1944, Kawanishi, Mitsubishi, and Nakajima, the nation's premier naval aircraft manufacturers, all received copies of the critical technical reports, accompanied by urgent directives to immediately implement the lessons learned. Engineers swiftly commenced drafting specifications for new fighter aircraft that would endeavor to incorporate some of the Hellcat's groundbreaking design philosophy. On paper, these proposed aircraft appeared highly promising, offering a glimmer of hope. In the grim reality of Japan's deteriorating industrial landscape, however, the production of most of these ambitious designs proved to be an insurmountable challenge. Kawanishi's direct response to this crisis was the N1K2J Shurden Kai, a sophisticated evolution of their existing N1K design that specifically aimed to emulate some of the Hellcat's combat capabilities. The Shurden Kai notably incorporated armor protection for the pilot, self-sealing fuel tanks to mitigate combat damage, and a formidable armament of 4 20mm cannons, capable of delivering devastating firepower. The prototype demonstrated genuine promise, achieving speeds approaching 370 miles per hour and exhibiting significantly improved high-altitude performance compared to the aging Zero. Test pilots lauded its impressive handling characteristics and considerable combat potential. Yet, translating this promising prototype into mass production proved to be an absolute nightmare. The Shurden Kai demanded approximately 17,000 man-hours to construct, more than double the time required for a Zero, and incorporated numerous components that necessitated precision manufacturing. Japan's industrial infrastructure, severely crippled by relentless bombing raids, struggled desperately to deliver components consistently and to the required quality. Consequently, a mere 400 units were completed before the war's conclusion. Mitsubishi, in its turn, undertook the ambitious development of the A7M Reppu, explicitly envisioned as the successor to the legendary Zero. Engineers meticulously designed this new aircraft from its inception, incorporating the crucial lessons derived from the Hellcat analysis: a heavier, more robust structure, comprehensive armor protection, self-sealing fuel tanks, and significantly more powerful armament. The detailed specification called for a potent 2,000 horsepower engine, which was intended to provide performance competitive with contemporary American fighters, while simultaneously retaining some of the Zero's famed maneuverability. While the design appeared highly compelling on paper, the first prototype did not achieve its maiden flight until October 1944, more than a year behind its initial schedule. The engine intended to power it, the Mitsubishi 9 Malawang Quachas, was plagued by persistent development problems. Issues such as chronic overheating, frequent bearing failures, and inconsistent manufacturing quality meant that the power plant never reliably achieved its rated output. Ultimately, a mere 8 A7M aircraft were constructed before all production efforts ceased entirely, a testament to the insurmountable industrial and technological hurdles faced by Japan. The manufacturing of essential components for Japan's war machine had, by this point, ground to a halt. The devastating material shortages underpinning these production failures were nothing short of catastrophic. The advanced self-sealing fuel tanks, which had so captivated Japanese engineers with their innovative design, critically depended on synthetic rubber compounds that Japan simply could not produce in sufficient volumes. Before the conflict, domestic rubber production had been scant, with the vast majority of vital supplies originating from territories acquired in Southeast Asia. However, by 1944, relentless American submarine warfare had irrevocably disrupted these crucial supply lines, virtually severing them entirely. Japanese engineers desperately attempted to devise viable substitute materials, experimenting with natural rubber alongside various chemical treatments, yet their endeavors yielded highly unreliable results at best. Some batches proved marginally adequate, while others failed completely, rendering any semblance of quality control impossible given the pervasive disarray within Japanese logistics and supply chains. The predicament concerning armor plate was equally critical. The Hellcat's formidable protection mandated high-quality steel alloys possessing very specific properties of hardness and toughness. Japan's steel industry, never truly formidable when measured against American benchmarks, was deteriorating rapidly under the dual strain of raw material scarcity and continuous Allied bombing raids. The limited steel that did become available was frequently diverted to more paramount military uses, such as naval construction, artillery production, and tank armor, relegating aircraft armor to a lower priority. Consequently, when armor material eventually reached aircraft manufacturers, it was often found to be inferior, either prone to shattering from excessive brittleness or lacking resilience due to being too soft. This meant it offered insufficient safeguarding, while still adding detrimental mass to the aircraft. Please stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. Even when sufficient raw components could be procured, the actual process of transforming them into functional aircraft grew progressively arduous. American B-29 Superfortress raids, which commenced in earnest in late 1944, methodically targeted crucial industrial facilities across Japan. The Musashino Aircraft Engine Plant, one of Nakajima's primary manufacturing sites, was struck relentlessly, causing production rates to plummet. Adding to the crisis, skilled workers were either being conscripted into military service or perishing in the bombing raids, their places taken by untrained personnel, who simply could not uphold the rigorous specifications demanded by meticulous aeronautical fabrication. A Zero fighter, which in 1942 would have required approximately 10,000 man-hours to construct, now demanded 15,000 or more, as worker efficiency eroded and stringent quality control measures necessitated extensive rectification and rework. The captured Hellcat had uncovered yet another profound issue, one that lay entirely beyond the scope of technical ingenuity: the yawning chasm in pilot training proficiency. American pilots arriving in the Pacific theater by 1944 had customarily undergone over 300 hours of flight training before entering hostilities. They had practiced gunnery until they could reliably hit targets, mastered formation flying until it became instinctive, and trained in tactics specifically designed to exploit their fighters' advantages. In stark contrast, Japanese pilot training had been drastically curtailed to barely 100 hours by 1944, with acute fuel shortages forcing even that reduced schedule to be cut further. New pilots were reaching combat units struggling merely to control their aircraft, much less engage in successful aerial combat. The engineering teams grasped the bitter paradox with stark clarity. They had meticulously scrutinized an example of America's premier interceptor, comprehended its superiority in full, yet remained utterly unable to bridge the disparity. The Hellcat, they realized, was not merely a better aircraft, it was the tangible product of an industrial system Japan could not duplicate, constructed from materials Japan could not obtain, and designed for manufacturing processes Japan could not execute. Every single lesson gleaned from the captured fighter merely underscored another unconquerable handicap. The geopolitical ramifications of the Hellcat analysis extended far beyond operational air warfare by early 1945. What the captured fighter revealed was not just an aircraft performance gap. It was a profound disparity in the fundamental war-making capacity between America and Japan. The combined fleet staff officers who meticulously perused these technical reports understood that if America possessed the capability to construct fighters of such advanced design in the volumes indicated by battlefield intelligence, then Japan had, in essence, already lost the economic conflict, irrespective of how many battles might yet remain to be fought. The production numbers themselves were astonishing. Grumman had supplied the first production Hellcats to the U.S. Navy in January 1943. By the close of that same year, more than 2,500 units had emerged from their manufacturing plants. Throughout 1944, production maintained a rate of approximately 500 aircraft per month. By the cessation of hostilities, Grumman alone would construct over 12,000 Hellcats, a figure representing more fighters than Japan's entire aircraft industry managed to produce across all types during the final 2 years of the war. Furthermore, the Hellcat represented just one of numerous American fighter types. The U.S. Navy also extensively deployed the F-4U Corsair, while the Army Air Forces fielded P-38 Lightnings, P-47 Thunderbolts, and P-51 Mustangs by the thousands. Japanese intelligence officers amassed projections of American aircraft production that initially appeared inconceivable until multiple independent sources corroborated the figures. America was producing over 90,000 aircraft annually by 1944, a colossal output that encompassed transport planes, bombers, fighters, and trainers, essentially the full spectrum of aerial combat necessities. Japan's highest manufacturing output year was also 1944, achieving approximately 28,000 aircraft of all types. Yet, even that production was already unraveling under the relentless pressure of Allied bombing campaigns and critical material shortages. The Americans were constructing aircraft at triple the pace Japan could manage, and individually, American aircraft were inherently superior to their Japanese counterparts across nearly every operational parameter. The Hellcat analysis also illuminated the extensive interconnectedness of America's technological and industrial base. Every advanced constituent part in the fighter, ranging from the R-2800 engine to the propeller, the hydraulic systems, the radios, the weaponry, and the instrumentation, originated from dedicated producers who furnished them abundantly to numerous aviation projects. Pratt & Whitney engines, for instance, propelled scores of different aircraft types, while Hamilton Standard propellers fitted fighters, bombers, and transport planes alike. The industrial ecosystem that supported the Hellcat's production was expansive, robust, and continually fortifying itself, even as Japan's own manufacturing base languished. This profound realization compelled a radical reevaluation of Japanese strategy. The entire war plan had been predicated upon premises that now appeared catastrophically erroneous. Japanese planners had fervently believed that early victories would afford them the necessary time to solidify territorial gains and construct fortified bulwarks that would render any American counteroffensive prohibitively expensive to maintain. They had further assumed that, after enduring substantial casualties, America would eventually broker a peace accord that would allow Japan to retain control over most of its conquered territories. The Hellcat, and the immense industrial might it represented, utterly shattered these foundational assumptions. American losses in the Marianas, in the Philippines, and throughout the relentless island-hopping campaign had utterly failed to impede the offensive because America could regenerate its strength more swiftly than Japan could diminish it. For every naval aviation asset Japan destroyed, 3 more materialized to fill the void. For every pilot killed, 2 newly trained aviators arrived from the vast American pilot development system. Japan, meanwhile, was experiencing irreplaceable losses of airmen and machines. Each engagement, even those where Japanese forces imposed substantial American losses, left Japan relatively diminished in strength, because the attrition rates were simply untenable. The captured Hellcat's most devastating disclosure was that American combat power was not merely sustained but was, in fact, still intensifying. Intelligence reports from early 1945 described new American fighters already being commissioned into service. These included upgraded F-4U Corsair models, subsequent iterations of the F-6F Hellcat equipped with more powerful engines, and even jet-propelled aircraft under construction. Each successive generation of American aircraft proved increasingly formidable than the last. In stark contrast, Japan's newest fighters, the few that actually reached production, were scarcely comparable with American designs from as far back as 1943. The technological gap, it was painfully clear, was expanding rather than diminishing. Senior Japanese officers consequently began considering alternatives that had been inconceivable only a year earlier. Some argued in favor of a prompt diplomatic resolution before Japan's situation became utterly irrecoverable. Others urged for an ultimate climactic engagement, one massive battle that would inflict such devastating casualties on American forces that negotiations would become possible. These intense debates occurred in the context of the Hellcat analysis sitting on desks across Tokyo, a tangible testament that Japan was fighting an enemy whose manufacturing prowess made a conventional battlefield triumph utterly impossible. By March 1945, the geopolitical assessment was starkly apparent. Japan possessed roughly 5,000 aircraft of all types remaining, most of which were outmoded, and many were immobilized due to a severe dearth of aviation fuel or essential components. American forces converging on the Ryukyu Islands, specifically Okinawa, could command thousands of carrier aircraft in addition to land-based air power from captured island bases. The numerical ratio was not merely disadvantageous, it was cataclysmic. The captured Hellcat had indeed helped Japanese planners comprehend the precise reasons for their impending defeat. However, understanding the problem did not, by itself, provide solutions. Some problems, once fully grasped, reveal themselves to be insurmountable given current capabilities. Japan faced exactly that situation in the spring of 1945. The captured Hellcat remained housed in a hangar at Yokosuka through the final months of the war, a mute observer to Japan's inevitable demise. By the summer of 1945, the engineers, who had so meticulously chronicled every aspect of the fighter, had been reassigned to more urgent tasks, primarily examining debris from B-29 raids and attempting to devise defensive strategies against the incendiary bombing offensive that was incinerating Japanese urban centers to ash. The technical reports they had compiled lay neglected, as the overarching military situation superseded detailed engineering insights. Comprehending why you were losing held little consequence when the conflict was irretrievably forfeited. When the conflict was already irrevocably lost, a poignant discovery was made. American forces following Japan's formal capitulation in August 1945 moved to occupy the Yokosuka Naval Arsenal, where they stumbled upon the Hellcat fighter. This formidable aircraft was found nestled amongst scores of other captured and domestically produced Japanese aircraft, each meticulously catalogued with its accompanying Japanese technical documentation. For the American intelligence officers, the scene carried an almost surreal quality. Here lay one of their very own formidable fighters, which had been painstakingly dismantled and subjected to rigorous enemy analysis. Every single component had been photographed with precision and measured with exacting detail. The Japanese technical drawings, remarkably comprehensive and precise, demonstrated an astonishing depth of understanding regarding the Hellcat's intricate design, a comprehension that arguably rivaled Grumman's original engineering blueprints. It presented a stark reflection, akin to gazing into a mirror that not only returned one's own image, but also conveyed someone else's profound interpretation of what that image truly signified. The historical reverberations of that particular captured fighter extend far beyond its immediate operational contribution during the tumultuous years of World War II. Instead, it stands as an illuminating case study, meticulously illustrating the complex mechanisms by which wars are ultimately won or lost, particularly at the critical juncture where overarching design philosophy, robust industrial capacity, and astute strategic vision converge. The Hellcat's undeniable success was not primarily attributable to its graceful aesthetics, its exceptional aerial maneuverability, or even its blistering top speed. Rather, its triumph stemmed from a pragmatic understanding shared by Grumman, its manufacturer, and the U.S. Navy, that prevailing in an air war necessitated the deployment of aircraft capable of being produced in vast quantities, designed with paramount pilot protection in mind, resilient enough to absorb substantial battle damage and continue fighting, and, crucially, amenable to routine maintenance under arduous combat conditions by ground crews who possess general mechanical skills rather than highly specialized craftsmanship. The discerning Japanese engineers, who meticulously scrutinized the captured Hellcat, unequivocally recognized the superior engineering solutions embedded within its design. However, mere intellectual recognition, no matter how acute, proved utterly insufficient to bridge the vast chasm between theoretical understanding and practical implementation. The iconic Zero, for instance, had been conceived and engineered for a swift, decisive conflict, a scenario where Japan's inherently limited industrial infrastructure could conceivably produce an adequate number of fighters to achieve transit air superiority within a constrained operational window. The Hellcat, conversely, was explicitly designed for an extended, grueling war of attrition, a protracted struggle where overwhelming industrial might and the imperative of maximizing pilot survivability would, in the final analysis, dictate the ultimate victor. Both aircraft, in their respective contexts, perfectly embodied the strategic visions of their nations. The profound tragedy for Japan lay in the devastating realization that their foundational strategic vision had been fundamentally erroneous from its very inception. Please stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Please write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. This situation offers a broader, more encompassing lesson regarding the intricate dynamics of technological competition in wartime. The practice of capturing and systematically analyzing enemy equipment constitutes a standard, indeed essential, component of intelligence gathering, and in this regard, Japan's engineers executed their duties flawlessly. Their efforts were characterized by meticulous thoroughness, unwavering professionalism, and unvarnished honesty in their assessments. Yet, intelligence data only acquires true significance if it can be effectively acted upon, and by the critical year of 1944, Japan found itself utterly incapable of translating the stark revelations gleaned from the Hellcat into meaningful action. The pervasive material shortages, crippling industrial bottlenecks, and severe resource constraints that rendered Japan unable to compete with the sheer volume and evolving quality of American fighters were issues not amenable to mere engineering refinements. These were, instead, deep-seated, fundamental limitations ingrained within Japan's industrial economy, and no quantity of captured enemy equipment, however insightful, possessed the power to fundamentally alter that immutable reality. The Hellcat's astounding kill ratio of 19-1 against enemy aircraft stands as one of the most disproportionate combat records ever documented in the annals of aviation history. Nevertheless, that impressive statistic alone does not encapsulate the entirety of the complex narrative. A substantial number of the Japanese aircraft that fell victim to the Hellcat were piloted by inadequately trained airmen, flying increasingly obsolete fighters, often embarking on missions that were, from their very outset, tantamount to suicide. By the waning months of 1944, Japanese naval aviation had descended into such desperate straits that even a fleet of perfectly engineered fighters, flown by expert pilots, would likely have had a negligible impact on the rapidly deteriorating strategic outcomes. The Hellcat was, in essence, engaging an adversary that had already suffered an irreversible industrial defeat, even as the brutal shooting war continued to rage for several more agonizing months. When historians delve into the intricate tapestry of the Pacific Air War, the singular captured Hellcat discovered at Yokosuka emerges as a perfect, emblematic representation of the conflict's intrinsic nature. It symbolized Japan's most earnest and competent endeavor to decipher and understand the formidable intricacies of American technology, an effort executed by highly skilled engineers who possessed the innate discernment to recognize superior quality when confronted with it. Yet, tragically, none of these diligent efforts ultimately mattered. The war had irrevocably shifted its fundamental character, ceasing to be a contest defined by the individual quality of aircraft and transforming instead into a gargantuan struggle governed by the resilience of industrial systems, unhindered access to critical resources, and the unwavering capacity to absorb staggering losses while relentlessly maintaining offensive pressure. Japan, despite meticulously capturing and assiduously analyzing every American weapon system, remained utterly powerless to surmount the profound and fundamental asymmetry in industrial capacity that defined the conflict. The fighter was eventually repatriated to the United States, where it endured years of quiet storage before undergoing a meticulous restoration process and finally being enshrined within a museum. It remains on display to this very day, proudly adorned in its original American markings, bearing no visible trace of its brief, yet profoundly significant, tenure in Japanese hands. However, within the hallowed confines of historical archives, the Japanese technical reports persist, hundreds of pages filled with painstaking analysis, professional engineering assessments, and a mounting crescendo of increasingly desperate recommendations. These documents collectively narrate the poignant story of an enemy who grasped with chilling clarity the precise reasons for their impending defeat, yet was tragically bereft of the tangible means to alter that inexorable outcome. In the crucible of warfare, sometimes the most profound and agonizing form of knowledge is the clear understanding of an insurmountable problem. Such clarity forces one to witness the inexorable approach of defeat with perfect, unblinking lucidity, yet simultaneously without any conceivable ability to intercede or prevent it. That solitary captured Hellcat at Yokosuka imparted this brutal, undeniable lesson to Japan with a depth and finality more profound than any battle ever could have achieved.